already directly तो entry है. There is nothing that Hi everyone. Very good morning to everyone.
Very good morning to everyone, and we extend a warm welcome to everyone present here for taking out time on a Sunday morning to attend this session. And I'm sure after this session, we'll be having a very good insights on the basics of transfer pricing. Thanks to Mr. CA Rishabh Bora for taking out time and having this session with all of us to enlighten us on this amazing topic. So we extend a warm welcome to you. So I guess since it's 11 and respecting everyone's time, we'll begin the session. And when people join, they can keep joining. So before starting with the session, we would in fact love to tell about our speaker, C.A. Rishabh Bora. So firstly, it is an absolute honor for TKG, the Knowledge Garage, that C.A. Rishabh Bora has chosen this platform to take this session. And we are extremely thankful to him. So I'll begin with the introduction. I'm sure everyone is very excited for this session. And CA Rishabh Bora has been having 7 years of professional experience in global transfer pricing assignments. So you guys would have an idea how amazing this session would be. 7 years of experience. His core practice is advising multinational corporations with Indian as well as foreign transfer pricing regulations in all contexts, which also includes planning, formulating transfer pricing policies, documentation, litigation, and advanced pricing agreements. Not only that, but he has also successfully presented at Mumbai Income Tax Appellate Tribunal at multiple occasions. Uh, this will sure give you all an idea that not only technically but also practically we would gain a lot of insights from him from today's session. He has served clients across various sectors, including information technology, investment advisory services, pharmaceuticals, and healthcare chemicals, etc. He also writes frequently for leading tax portals and addresses forums at regular intervals. So I'm sure this this session is going to be very much important for all of us, and I'm happy that so many of you have already joined. And before we hand over to Rishabh, we would also like to tell you all that we at Knowledge Garage, that is the TKG, have been facilitating webinars at various occasions. And so if you guys want to plan any kind of webinars, we do the end-to-end facilitation of webinars, from coordination to planning the webinars, to creating images for webinars, promoting it on social media. Everything you look for while planning your own webinar, you can approach us and we will definitely help you for that. Apart from that, we've been also helping individuals, firms, etc. in developing their social media and digital profiles. So this is what it is about TKG. And as I've already given introduction of Rishabh as well, CA Rishabh Bora, I would like him to take over from here.
Thank you so much for the introduction. It's glad that I have been given the opportunity to speak on the transfer pricing for the common benefit of everyone. And thanks everyone for joining and taking out time on Sunday. I mean, pleasure to speak on the topic of transfer pricing, which I always love to do that. To begin with, I think most of you must be aware, in brief, what is transfer pricing about. So just to tell you a brief about what is transfer pricing is basically determining a price between a related party transactions. The price in alignment of the market price, the price in alignment of the independent scenario So those determination of price between the independent scenario, or the price between the related party in alignment of the independent scenario, is called as the transfer pricing. So I'll tell you why we are discussing with the transfer pricing in today's scenario. So like you must be aware, post 1991, wherein India opened the doors for liberalization and the globalization, the lots of multinational companies have actually invested in India, or many of the Indians headquarter company have actually started investing abroad, and that's why lots of related party transactions kept increasing significantly, and thereby the cases have been increasing, wherein the profit is actually getting shifted from high tax jurisdiction country to a low tax jurisdiction country. So basically, like you must be aware, in India, the corporate tax is somewhere around close to 30 to 33%. People have actually started shifting of profit from India to countries like Cyprus, UAE, Cayman Islands, Bermuda. You all must have heard all these names before, wherein these names are commonly well known as tax havens, and many of the MNCs have taken a advantage of shifting profits to those regions in order to save overall tax of the group. So because of all these issues, the concept of transfer pricing has been evolved over the years. Though in India, the transfer pricing provisions have actually uh, incorporated in the Income Tax Act somewhere around Finance Act 2001. But at a global level, at a worldwide level, the concept of transfer pricing actually started evolving in the late 1960s or 70s, especially for the developed countries of USA or UK or few other European region. They have actually started adopting this regulation from the 70s or 80s onwards. And then India has also, in line with those countries, started incorporating the regulation of transfer pricing. So just to give you a glimpse of the agenda that we intend to cover today, we'll try to cover the concepts of transfer pricing, the important definitions as per Income Tax Act, the most appropriate method given by the Income Tax Act to benchmark transactions, the three-tier documentation approach as per the OECD BEPS action plan and as per the Income Tax Act. We'll take you through that. Then the FAR analysis and the economic analysis, the most favorite topic for me, and even the heart of the transfer pricing, I would say. Then what is the brief transfer pricing audit process, the litigation mechanisms in India, penalties, the recent amendments and introduction in TP, and at the end, the complex issues or way forward. So while all of these topics may take a longer hours, possibly a 2 hours or 3 hour session for each topic, we'll try to cover all the topics in brief, and if there are any questions at the end, we'll try to address that. Let's begin with the WH question, simple basics of transfer pricing. What is transfer pricing? Why is there a need? When do provisions originate? And how does it work? Like I mentioned, the transfer pricing is the determination of price between the related party transactions. And like I mentioned, the need arises because of the increasing related party transactions, not only in India, but across jurisdiction. And that's why in order to have a fair share of allocation to a country where the actual economic activity or the value chain activity undertakes, only those countries should be eligible to retain a fair share of revenue. So that's why the concept of transfer pricing originates. Like in India, I mentioned the transfer pricing provisions were incorporated in the Finance Act 2001 with effect from financial year 2002-3. Over the years, like 17 to 18 years, there were lots of amendments and lots of development in the topic itself. Even the tax officers and tax authorities are well versed with the global TP regulations, and they keep on intending to incorporate those regulations in the tax scrutiny or in the Income Tax Act itself. And how does it work? We'll cover that in the next slide. So as I mentioned, transfer price in the definition is to determine the price of any transaction, be it a tangible property or intangible property or services, or the transactions of financing character, be it a loan or interest or business restructuring or reorganization. We need to establish that all the transactions between those related parties are at arm's length. The process of fixing of this price is commonly known as transfer pricing. And even the OECD defines the transfer pricing as the prices at which enterprise transfers physical goods or tangible property and provides services to its associated enterprise. What is the concept of associated enterprise? We'll cover the definition in the next coming slides. So like I mentioned, as per Income Tax Act 92(1), any income or allowance for any expense or any interest arising from international transaction shall be computed having regard to the arm's length price. So first of all, the basic conditions of applying transfer pricing provisions in India requires that from the transaction, some income should be arising from particular transactions or some expenditure for which deduction is going to be claimed by the MNC or the corporate company. In those cases, the international transactions or international transfer pricing, they come into picture from India perspective. So determining the prices of related party vis-a-vis the prices of the market scenario is commonly known as transfer price and the arm's length price. Let us understand what if there is no transfer pricing provisions, or what if before transfer pricing provisions originate in India prior to 2001, what was the scenario to that? I have produced here one example. Let us assume there is an Indian company who is a resident taxpayer, and the tax rate is somewhere around 30% at which it is paying tax. Indian company is producing a goods, the costing of which is INR 50 rupees. Let us assume that Indian company is selling these goods to a non-related party situated in UAE at 1000 rupees. And thereby the profit of rupees 950 has been earned by Indian company from sale of goods to a non-related party. In a second scenario, Indian company is selling those similar goods to another related party entity in UAE at only rupees 100 as against rupees 1000 to non-related party. And thereby in related party scenario, Indian company is making a profit of only rupees 50 as against profit of rupees 950. Now, for the goods sold to non-related party, Indian company is paying tax of rupees 285, that is 30% tax on rupees 950. As against that, Indian company is paying tax of rupees only 15 on the related party transactions. Thereby, if you can see, there is a total tax evasion of rupees 270 in India. Like, because of this picture, I mean, it is quite clear that as per India, from the India perspective, there is a tax evasion of 270, and at the same time, the Indian company is not liable to pay any taxes in UAE because UAE being a no tax jurisdictions. So thereby, many of the global MNCs or many of the multinational corporations used to adopt this kind of model, wherein they used to evade taxes while transacting with the related parties, and that's why there is a need to develop a transfer pricing provisions to control this kind of tax evasion mechanisms. The transfer pricing provisions actually incorporated. I hope the intentions of the transfer pricing provisions is clear. What was the intention behind incorporating transfer pricing provisions? Just to give you a glance, while in India, TP provisions have actually started from 2002-3. If we take or if we analyze the TP adjustments made in India on account of transfer pricing from 2007 to 15, if you see in 2007, the tax adjustments on account of transfer pricing was somewhere around 3,400 crore, and the tax adjustments increased to somewhere around 70,000 crore in 2013. This is because of the well famous case laws of Vodafone and Shell, wherein the high level of adjustment has been made by the income tax authorities. While the adjustment has been again reduced to somewhere around 46,000 crores in 2015, and afterwards the CBDT have actually stopped providing data of tax adjustments in the public domain. While adjustments has actually gone down from 2013 to 2015 because of the exchange of agreement which has already started between India and few other countries, we expect that lots of transfer pricing adjustments will increase over the years. At the same time, initially in the initial period, while the adjustments mainly relate to a traditional adjustments of selection of comparable or rejection of comparables, now onwards, I mean in last couple of years, tax authorities have become smart enough to analyze all the value chain analysis and the economic chain analysis of the MNC as a whole, where the actual activity is it has been undertaken, or where the actually employees have been seated. All those issues have been actually been started analyzed by the income tax authorities now onwards. So thereby we may see the increasing trend of TP adjustments in the coming years. So this was the background of the transfer pricing provisions and the intention of TP. Now let us analyze the important definition of transfer pricing as per the income tax regulation. The first and foremost important definition is the associated enterprise. As per Income Tax Act Section 92A, the definition of associated enterprise mainly relates to a direct or indirect participation in management, control, or capital. So the management, control, or capital is the important definition on which the income tax authorities or Income Tax Act have emphasized on. The management or capital or control means, the capital means any amount of investment and any amount of the rights of voting power in by one enterprise in another enterprise is commonly known as the direct or indirect capital ownership. At the same time, the management and control ownership relates to wherein one enterprise is having a power to make significant decisions of another enterprise, either a proactive or reactive in nature. That can be anything. So any enterprise, because of the management or control or capital, is having a relationship with another enterprise. In that case, both the enterprises will become associated enterprise, and in that case, any transactions between those enterprises needs to be evaluated from income tax regulation perspective. Importantly, Income Tax Act have mentioned that if any of the condition is satisfied during the year, then both the associated enterprises will be AE for the whole year. For example, for financial year 1920, let's assume that one enterprise become the associated enterprise for another in August 2019. In spite of becoming AE in August 2019, both the associated enterprises needs to comply with the regulations for the full year, and any transactions entered even before August 2019 needs to be benchmarked or needs to be evaluated from TP provisions itself. At the same time, the primary conditions of 92A relates to the capital control or management. Income Tax Act have also provided secondary conditions in Section 92A2. This secondary condition of 92A2 needs to be satisfied along with 92A. So both the conditions needs to be satisfied jointly. There was a controversy revolved in last many years wherein the case laws pertaining to this issue highlighted wherein the 92A1 and 92A conditions needs to be satisfied together or independently. But over the years, this issue has been come to an end, wherein most of the authorities or most of the ITAT or High Court have actually settled the issue by saying that 92A1 and A2 conditions needs to be satisfied jointly. So let us take a look at what is the conditions of 92A2. A2 conditions relates to more or less similar to capital control or management like we analyzed in Section 92A1, wherein 92A2 conditions for capital perspective relates to where one enterprise holds more than 26% of direct or indirect holding in another enterprise, then it will become AE of another enterprise. If one entity is holding more than 26% in both the entity, like for example A Limited is holding more than 26% in B and C Limited, in that case B Limited and C Limited will itself become associated enterprise for income tax provisions. At that same time, if one enterprise is holding a more than 51% of loan of total assets in another enterprise, in that case again those both enterprise will become associated enterprise. Another conditions relates to guarantee and interest, where one enterprise is holding a guarantee of more than 10% of debt in another enterprise. In that case, it will become AE of another entity. Similar to that, there are conditions of management wherein if one enterprise or one company appoints more than 50% of directors or one or more executive director in another enterprise, those both enterprise will become associated enterprise for the purpose of Income Tax Act. There are few conditions from activity perspective which are unique in nature and which are not there as per AS 18 conditions or Section 40A2 conditions. Those conditions relate to if one enterprise is 100% dependent on the use of tangible for manufacturing or for business purpose. in that case, both the enterprise will become associated enterprise. Important to note that even in that case, if both companies are as such third party or unrelated party, but because of having a dependence on the use of intangible by one enterprise to on another enterprise, those become associated enterprise for the purpose of transfer pricing. And again, in that case, TP provisions needs to be adhered to. There is another conditions that if one enterprise is purchasing more than 90% of raw materials from another enterprise, in spite of that being a third party entity or unrelated entity, those both entities will become associated enterprise for the purpose of transfer pricing. So those are typically interesting conditions. You will not find those kind of conditions in the Income Tax Act or as per AS 18 RPT schedule or as per the Companies Act related party definition. Those are the unique definition as per transfer pricing provisions and which needs to be evaluated carefully in order to establish whether TP regulations are applicable or no. At the same time, there is few conditions relating to the control, wherein one enterprise is controlled by an individual and another enterprise is controlled by individual or jointly by that individual. In that case, because of the control, both enterprise will become AE of each other. So all these conditions are more or like in alignment of the overall definition of management, capital or control, and we need to analyze the facts of the particular case in detail to establish whether two enterprises are associated enterprise or no. So there is a first and foremost condition for analyzing whether TP provisions are applicable or no. The second most important condition is to understand whether the transactions between two associated enterprise is international transactions or no. So let us have a look what the Income Tax Act says about the international transactions. As per Income Tax Act section 92B, any transactions between two or more associated enterprise, either of both whom are non-residents, and any transaction includes arrangement, understanding or action in consent, whether it formal or in writing or whether or not enforceable by legal proceedings. In that case, the transactions will be considered as the international transactions between two associated enterprise. So as you can see, the definition of transaction is kind of quite inclusive and quite comprehensive, which covers all the transactions more or less between two or more associated enterprise. Even though possibly one enterprise may not be an Indian resident entity, there are few scenarios wherein both the companies are non-resident as per Income Tax Act, but even though in the transaction between them may get covered under the Indian income tax or Indian transfer pricing provisions, those conditions need to be analyzed in detail to establish whether TP regulations are applicable or no. If we categorize international transactions in few categories, those categories relates to the category of tangible property, intangible property, the transactions relating to the capital financing in nature, transactions of provision of services, whether technical services or royalty or intragroup services. Lots of intragroup services have been started increasing after multinational companies have started increasing their trend of related party transactions. And even though transactions of business restructuring, the transactions of restructuring or reorganization wherein the transactions relating to demerger or merger, or wherein there is a transactions relating to one enterprise becoming from full-fledged manufacturer or distributor to a limited risk distributor, those kind of reallocation of shifting of functions or the risk may also get covered under the definition of international transactions. So broadly, any transactions between associated enterprise may trigger the implication of transfer pricing, and that needs to be analyzed carefully. There are few conditions wherein even though the transactions does not relate to a transactions between associated enterprise, wherein one enterprise of Indian company is having a transaction with third party, in spite of that transaction being with third party, possibly that transaction may get covered as a part of deemed international transactions as provided in the section 92B2. So I'll tell you where this happens in case wherein the prior agreement is already entered between the parent entity of A Limited and the third party itself. So many a times there arises the scenario wherein there exists a prior agreement between associated enterprise and third party. Most of the time you must have heard about the global MSAs or global tri-party agreement. To take a simple example, For example, there is a scenario of Microsoft India, and there is a holding company in Microsoft USA. Microsoft USA has instructed Microsoft India to purchase a particular software or particular hardware only from one category of local Indian company. Let's assume ABC Limited. So any transaction between Microsoft India and ABC Limited, considering that the prices are predetermined by Microsoft USA, in that case, the transaction between Microsoft India and ABC Limited, which may or may not be a resident entity, will also get triggered under transfer pricing provisions. So all those cases will also require to adhere to Indian transfer pricing regulations. So these kind of transactions, even though in spite of being entered with unrelated party, may also require us to comply with the Indian transfer pricing regulations. Now, like I mentioned, the first and foremost condition was to establish the fact whether two entities are associated enterprise or no, whether there is a international transactions during the year between them. If there is international transactions, how do we ensure that pricing between them are at arm's length, or pricing between them are entered in the independent scenario? Because of this purpose, Income Tax Act have already provided few methods basis which we can determine whether pricings are at arm's length or no. So there are few traditional methods which has been provided by OECD or UN manual, and which has been adopted by most of the developed and other developing countries. Those are the traditional methods relating to like comparable uncontrolled price method, resale price method, or cost plus method. Over and above these traditional methods, there are few profit based methods which has been prescribed by Income Tax Act. Those are profit split method, transactional net margin method, or other method. These three methods are more likely are aligned with the profit mechanism, wherein the traditional methods are more likely aligned with the pricing of the particular transactions. So we'll understand all these methods one by one in detail in the coming slides. First and foremost is the comparable uncontrolled price method, well known as CUP method. This is the most preferred method, I would say, not only in India but across the world. While I tell you this is the most preferred method, Income Tax Act does not provide that any priority of method to be adopted for benchmarking the transactions. Income Tax Act requires that most appropriate method out of these 6 methods, most appropriate method needs to be selected. But since CUP method requires a higher level of comparability or strict comparability, comparability of the product or the comparability of services in the nature of be it quality, be it color, size, be it geographical factors, all these factors needs to be compared in a strict scenario while adopting CUP method. And in CUP method, we ideally compare the prices of the product or services and not the profit or loss. So just to tell you the example, there are internal CUP or external CUP. The internal CUP relates to wherein A Limited, that is Indian company, is selling goods to a related party subsidiary company, and A Limited has also sold goods to a third party entity. In that case, if we can compare the pricing of related party transaction and pricing of unrelated party transactions of A Limited, and if both the goods and both the products are something similar, we can compare the prices under internal CUP methodology. This is called as the internal CUP methodology. Under external CUP methodology, if A Limited has sold goods to a subsidiary company and something similar goods have been sold by some third party in independent market scenario, we can compare the prices of goods sold by A Limited to its related party vis-a-vis prices of similar goods under independent scenario. While internal CUP is the most preferred method because of availability of data, external CUP is often difficult to adopt because of difficulty to obtain data of third party scenario. For example, A Limited has sold let's say software licenses to its subsidiary. It is difficult to understand the pricing of similar software between a third party scenario wherein the nature of software is something similar, geography is something similar, the period in which transaction has been entered is something similar. So all those factors needs to be similar to adopt external CUP method, and thereby external CUP is often difficult to adopt. But like I mentioned, importantly, the CUP method requires prices to be compared and that's how it is the most preferred method, not only for taxpayers but uh, amongst the tax authorities. But often because of the unavailability of data or because of strict comparability, it is not possible to adopt CUP method at times. Similarly, there is another method, cost plus method, wherein um, cost plus method mainly is applicable in a scenario wherein one enterprise is actually purchased a semi-finished kind of goods from one entity. At the same time, after purchasing that semi-finished goods, it has made some value addition to that, and ultimately adding after adding few gross margin to that cost, it has sold to its related party. Just to take an example, that A Limited has purchased products from third party at ₹100. It has made some value addition, maybe of packaging or maybe of some labor or maybe of some logistics factors of INR 50 rupees. So the total cost for A Limited is somewhere around 150 rupees. Afterwards, it has added a margin of 50 rupees for A Limited, and it has sold ultimate goods to A Limited's parent entity at INR 200 rupees. In that case, in this scenario, A Limited can adopt a cost plus method wherein the gross profit margin earned from this activity can be compared with the gross profit margin of third party companies who have actually earned similar gross profit margin from the selling of similar products. So this is applicable in most of the scenario wherein semi-finished goods have been purchased by one entity, and after manufacturing or after making some value addition, it has sold goods to its related entity. So in that case, cost plus method may be adopted. Similar to that, there is a resale price method, which is more often adopted in a case of distributor entity, wherein A Limited Indian entity has purchased goods of INR 75 from its related party without making any value addition and without making any of the activity. It has sold these goods at INR 100 to a third party. So the 25 rupees gross profit margin earned by A Limited needs to be compared with the similar gross profit margin earned by the independent third party companies for the similar kind of products or services, needs to be benchmarked using our resale price method. So this is more often used in a case of distributor model, wherein Indian company is actually reselling the products, as the name suggests, resale price method. How much profit margin or how much gross profit margin has been earned by the A Limited after selling products to a third party entity. This is applicable only in case when it is purchasing from related party and selling goods to third party. But in the reverse scenario, wherein Indian company is purchasing goods from third party and selling goods to related party, RPM method cannot be adopted. This is very interesting to note this point. The another method relates to the profit split method. One of the most complex method, and not many multinational corporations actually adopt a profit split method because of its complex characteristics to adopt those methods. Profit split method mainly relates in the cases of intangible property, wherein it is difficult to analyze independent transactions of one enterprise or independent profitability of one enterprise, wherein the contribution made by related parties, maybe two or more related parties, are such that it is difficult to segregate those transactions. In that case, the profit from the overall scenario or profit from the holistic transactions needs to be analyzed at first go, and thereby considering the contribution by all the entities, the profit needs to be splitted between those related parties. Like I mentioned, because of the profit shifting or because of the complex analysis of how much proportion the profit needs to be shifted or profit needs to be allocated between two or related parties is a complex analysis. Like if just to give you an example, in the case wherein PSM may be adopted, one entity have actually researched to produce some kind of a software. For example, one entity wants to develop a kind of software. So one A Limited has researched the market scenario, what is the demand for this software, what kind of coding would be required. All this research has been undertaken by one entity. Another entity has actually developed that software. All the employees have been employed by that another related party entity, and it has actually developed that software. The third related party has actually distributed that software It has actually borne the market risk. It has actually done the market research. What are the market scenario? What is the demand of the customers? Who are the target audience? So all these entities has actually contributed for earning a profit from selling of that software. It is difficult to identify a particular transactions in an independent scenario, and thereby the overall profitability of that particular transaction needs to be calculated at first go, and basis the contribution made by all the entity. For example, the contribution of A Limited is, let's say, 25%, contribution of B Limited is, let's say, 50%, and contribution of C Limited is again 25%. The profit needs to be segregated or allocated between these three related parties basis their contribution of their profitability. Because of the complex characteristics, it is often not adopted by many of the multinational enterprises, and in spite of adopting this method, especially lower level authorities often challenge the application of this method. The last one is the transactional net margin method, most preferred method and the practical method most of the Indian companies which adopt, often known as the residuary method, wherein the first four methods are not adopted in because of one or more reasons. Multinational corporations or the Indian companies often tend to adopt transactional net margin method. Transactional net margin method is often less affected by the because of the functions or the risk borne by the independent entities, and it is often compare the net level profit, net level operating profit from the related party transactions vis-a-vis similar operating profit for the sale or for the purchase of similar goods or services. So basically, if there is a transaction between sale of goods by A Limited to B Limited, the operating profit earned by A Limited from related parties, let's say 11 or 12%, we need to identify the similar profitability of the similar third party entity after selling or after producing similar products or services in an independent scenario, and thereby we can compare the operating profit margin of the related party transactions and non-related party transactions. In that case, we can adopt TNMM method. It is often residuary method, and most of the entity often tend to adopt this kind of TNMM method. And the last and not the least is the other method, wherein all the five methods are not adopted because of one or more reasons. Income Tax Act have actually provided the option to adopt other method, wherein other method can be anything, wherein you can ideally able to justify or substantiate the pricing between the related party entities. This can be other method. Factors can be kind of third party quotations or the valuation report from the broker or consulting firm, a tender or bid document, some kind of standard rate card. So all those kind of factors which can actually help you to justify or demonstrate that your intercompany pricing or related party pricing is at arm's length prices can be adopted as a part of other method. So this is a kind of residuary method, but it is often challenged by tax authorities because of its not so formal approach of adopting other method. Just to give you a summary of all the methods, like I mentioned, the CUP methods requires the highest level of comparability as against the lowest level of comparability that is required under TNMM method, wherein the RPM and PSMM requires a kind of medium or higher level of functional comparability. At the same time, the CUP method, like I mentioned earlier, requires the comparison of the prices of the transactions. As against that, RPM and CPM methods requires a comparison of the gross profit margin, and at the same time the TNMM methods requires a comparison of operating profit margin as against the prices or as against the gross profit margin. So this is a kind of glimpse of the total summary of all the most appropriate methods that has been prescribed by the Income Tax Act regulation. Now, just to give you a glance of the three-tier documentation approach, like we mentioned that the first and foremost condition was to establish that two enterprises are associated enterprises of each other. Then there is an international transaction between them. Then we have selected the most appropriate method to benchmark the transactions. Now all these analyses requires to be documented as per the prescribed regulations of Income Tax Act and the global OECD regulations. While India is not a member of OECD till now, it is it always takes guidance from the OECD BEPS action plan. Till now, OECD BEPS, like we mentioned, like India has adopted transfer pricing provisions to reduce or to eliminate shifting of profit. OECD, that is Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, has also developed a mechanism to restrict shifting of profit from one high taxpayer jurisdiction to no tax jurisdiction, and they have actually determined uh, action plans to determine those are more commonly known as BEPS action plan. So till now, more than 135 countries have actually adopted these action plans, uh, and India is also a party to a party who has actually adopted action plans. So like there is a concept of transfer pricing documentation as per Indian Income Tax Act. There is also a concept of CBC report, that is country by country report, and the master file as per OECD Action Plan 13, which India has actually adopted. Just that it is not applicable, three-tier documentation approach is not applicable to all the Indian entities, but it is applicable mostly to entities or multinational enterprise having a turnover or consolidated turnover of more than 5,500 crore rupees. So you can understand that mainly the large and very large multinational organizations like Reliance, Infosys, TCS, or those kind of organizations would be made applicable to adopt a three-tier documentation approach, wherein they have to provide a documentation of country by country report, which is more often provides the information of tax jurisdiction wise information, statistical information of the all the countries wherein Reliance or Infosys or TCS has a presence. This kind of CBC report provides information of taxes paid, income and jurisdiction wise taxes paid, income and the number of employees have been employed by the multinational enterprise across jurisdictions. So all those kind of information needs to be provided in country by country report. Against that, master file requires to give information of the blueprint of the group TP policies. This gives information of the all the group intercompany transactions, the pricing policy adopted between the group transfer pricing transactions, and this needs to be submitted to the tax authorities. And the local file is applicable to all the Indian entities who have actually entered into a transaction with its overseas related party, and that needs to be submitted to a local tax authorities. Like in India, we have to submit that Indian documentation report to a local Indian income tax authorities. Wherein the local file documentation needs to be submitted only to a local authorities, that will not be exchanged with the another country. Against that, master file and country by country report will be exchanged by India income tax authorities with the other countries which from which India has actually started implemented exchange of information agreements. So those would be applicable only in the case of large or very large organization. But at the same time, right now we should try to focus on the local file, which is applicable to all the Indian entities who have actually entered into a transaction with overseas related party. This is a kind of complex analysis and to understand three-tier documentation, and this itself is a independent topic to understand what kind of components would be required to be submitted here. Just to focus on the local transfer pricing documentation as per section 92D, read with rule 92D, this is a kind of jigsaw puzzle I have developed, which requires that local TP documentation requires to provide information of organizational structure, that is a shareholding of Indian entities, shareholding of the group, the industry in which the Indian entity operates. For example, if the Indian entity operates in the software industries or the media industries or the pharmaceutical industries, what is the overall scenario for that particular industry as in the Indian context, or what is the scenario of that industry in the global context if the industry is such that it is more often affected by the global practices. We have to also give the important terms and conditions of that particular control transactions entered between two associated enterprise, the reference of the intercompany agreement, what is the pricing policy, what is the credit period terms between these associated enterprises. So all those important terms and conditions of the intercompany agreement needs to be provided in TP documentation report. Thereby, there comes the FAR and comparability analysis, which requires to give information of what is the functions performed or the risk assumed by Indian entity or the overseas related party, and how we have adopted the most appropriate method to benchmark that particular transactions? How have we actually identified the pricing or the profitability under an independent market scenario? How can we compare the prices of related party under independent scenario? All this analysis needs to be given as a part of the documentation. You won't believe, but as on today, all the transfer pricing additions and done by income tax authorities, out of that 60 to 70% of the adjustments relates to because of incomplete transfer pricing documentation or because of inaccurate details submitted by the taxpayers in the documentation report. So it is very important to provide all the necessary information as per the regulation. Otherwise, in the absence of giving all the information, there is always a risk of higher TP addition or at the same time levying of penalty by tax authorities. So it is important to complete the documentation in such a way that tax authorities cannot take a position that taxpayer has not provided a complete documentation report. So thereby it is important to understand what components actually are forming part of TP documentation report. So just to categorize, if we analyze, the documentation requires a kind of entity-related information, like I mentioned, the corporate background, the business of the Indian entity, the industry overview in which the industry operates, if the entity is eligible for any kind of tax deduction or tax holiday. So all those kind of what is the profile and the business of the related parties, those kind of entity-related information needs to be provided in the documentation report. At the same time, the pricing related information needs to be provided, wherein the FAR analysis, the economic and comparability analysis needs to be provided in the documentation reports. At the same time, the reference of the agreement, invoices, and all the correspondence or emails, for example, at the time of availing intra-group services from the global MNCs, availing of IT services or availing of technical know-how services, it is important to demonstrate what is the benefit that Indian company has received by availing these services. All those kind of benefit analysis or cost benefit analysis needs to be documented in such a way that it can be submitted at a later point of time whenever required. At the same time, the supporting documents, like I mentioned, if there is any quotation or if there is any government report or financial stock exchange report or the financial statements, all those supporting documents needs to be attached to or needs to be maintained in order to be submitted at a later point of time. So this all consists as a part of the overall local TP documentation, which needs to be maintained or prepared, wherein the intercompany transaction is more than INR 1 crore. So Income Tax Act have actually provided a threshold of INR 1 crore. Only in that case, this documentation needs to be reported. So while even a single rupee intercompany transaction needs to be reported in form number 3CB, that is TP return, but documentation needs to be prepared only in case the transactions is exceeding INR 1 crore rupees. But even in the cases wherein the transaction is less than INR 1 crore, income tax authorities requires that some basic documentation to demonstrate or substantiate that pricings are at arm's length price. Those basic documentation needs to be maintained by the Indian taxpayer. So that threshold needs to be kept in mind, which has actually granted some benefit to a small and very small related party companies. Now the important concept of FAR analysis has actually evaluated over the years. This is actually the heart of the documentation and my favorite topic as such. The FAR analysis is basically to understand or evaluate what is the functions performed by the Indian entities or the related party, what are the economic characteristics or what are the contributions made by the both the related party entities under a controlled transactions. For example, there is a transaction between Indian entity who have actually provided a provision of software services to its overseas related party. In that case, what is the functions performed by Indian entities, like who have actually researched to produce that software, who is actually developed that software, who is responsible to undertake coding or developing activity, who is actually responsible to maintain a sufficient stock of that inventory, who is actually responsible to undertake a kind of functions of the undertaking market research analysis. So all those functions needs to be examined carefully, and what is the role of both the enterprises under control scenario. At the same time, what are the risks borne by both the related party entities under the control scenario that needs to be evaluated. To continue with our example, what is the risk of the market risk that has been borne by Indian company or the foreign enterprise? Which entity has actually borne the risk of working capital? Which entity is actually bearing the risk of foreign exchange? Like you must be aware, INR to USD foreign fluctuation in last couple of years, the fluctuation is more than 8 to 10%. So it is important to understand which entity is actually undertaking the risk of foreign fluctuation, because 8 to 10% is kind of quite significant, which can actually change the profitability of the either of the entities. So it is important to understand which entity is actually undertaking the risk. This can be analyzed, the invoicing arrangement, which entities invoicing in USD, what is the currency of the invoicing, what is the credit period, which entity is actually undertaking the credit risk. The credit risk means ultimately to earn or ultimately to recover the outstanding amount from the ultimate debtors. So which entity is actually taking a risk of bad debt or risk of credit period? Those kind of analysis of risk needs to be understood in quite detail. At the same time, which entities actually have employed significant tangible or intangible assets, be it a tangible property or the premises, or possibly the use of the intangible property like the brand or the technology or trademark or patent while actually undertaking that intercompany transactions. So it is important to understand which entity has actually performed a higher level of FAR, and ultimately that has been resulting in a higher amount of profit or lower amount of profit. As the economic rule goes, higher the risk, higher the return. Something similar to that, transfer pricing is also something similar. The entity which has actually performed a higher functions or higher risk, that entity needs to be compensated with the higher amount of profitability. So it is because of to understand which entity is actually is responsible, or which entity is actually liable to get a higher amount of profitability. It is important to understand or undertake the FAR analysis. After undertaking the FAR analysis, we can ideally understand which is a simpler entity, which entity has actually performed a significant amount of economic valuation analysis, which entity has actually simpler entity to in order to compare what is the characterization of the entity, whether it is a full-fledged entrepreneur or it is a low-risk captive service provider which is not undertaking any risk. So all this characterization or the definition of the simpler entity or the complex entity can be evaluated only after undertaking the FAR analysis. The FAR analysis is important to understand the amount of profitability one entity is actually responsible to earn that profitability. After undertaking the FAR analysis, this is important to understand how we will actually compare. FAR analysis will actually help you to understand the amount of profit Indian enterprise is eligible. For example, out of 100 rupees profitability, Indian entity is eligible for, let's say, 75 rupees. So that is the analysis that has been helped by the FAR analysis. Now that whether that 75 rupees is the correct profitability of Indian rupees or no, that needs to be analyzed by undertaking the economic analysis or the comparability analysis. Just to give you an example, this is the different kind of cell phones here, like Apple, Samsung, Nokia, and BlackBerry. While the basic objective or the intention of all these cell phones are to dial or to receive a call or to send or receive a messages, there is a few unique characteristics of all these cell phones. Like Apple is known for its higher premium brand, and it is known for the premium customers only. At the same time, Nokia 1100 phones or the simpler phones, which was actually easy to utilize, but at the same time, it does not have a higher features of camera or higher amount of like smartphones, which other smartphones like Samsung or Apple has. At the same time, BlackBerry also has a kind of something unique characteristics. Like it was one of the first cell phone which is having a QWERTY features. So all these cell phones, while the basic characteristics remain the same, but at the same time the secondary or the different characteristics of the pricing of the brand, that needs to be undertaken while undertaking the comparability analysis. So ideally, you cannot compare the profitability of Apple cell phone with the Nokia cell phone, because Apple cell phones, like you know, the costing of the cell phone is only possibly 5 to 10,000 rupees, but the selling price is possibly 70 to 80,000 rupees. So there is a profitability of, let's say, 600 to 700%. Wherein Nokia cell phone, the profitability percentage possibly is only 10 to 20%. So it is important to understand which products or services that you are comparing. It is not that the broader level of product comparability can be possible in all the scenario. We need to keep in mind whether are we comparing the similar products or services wherein the broader comparability factors or broader characteristics remain the same. At the same time, something similar to that, you cannot compare the characteristics of Maruti 800 with the Mercedes brand or with the other high level SUV cars, because of the high level SUV cars or the Mercedes cars are a kind of premium brands that requires a kind of higher pricing or higher technology to develop that particular model. At the same time, Maruti 800 is a kind of quite basic in characteristics. The pricing is kind of quite lower as compared to this kind of SUV or Mercedes. So this kind of cars possibly, or this kind of products cannot be compared with kind of another characteristics or another products wherein the features are completely different in a way. So we need to keep in mind while comparing the products whether the overall features or characteristics are something similar or no. It is important to understand the intention behind comparability analysis. You cannot compare oranges with apple. You can only compare oranges with oranges. So that's the simple rule of transfer pricing. The comparison needs to be in such a way that we are comparing a similar kind of products. So there is a process of the overall economic analysis. Like we understand, the initial process goes with the primary functional analysis, which can help you to understand the characterization or the understand the simpler or the complex entity. Afterwards, you have already selected the most appropriate method to benchmark the transactions. Afterwards, the next step comes the comparability analysis, which right now we are evaluating the process. The comparability analysis requires to understand or to undertake the help of few licensed databases available in the market, which can actually gives you the insights of the third party entities which are actually engaged in the similar industries, what kind of profitability those kind of industries or those kind of companies are having, what are the qualitative or quantitative factors which needs to be kept in mind while comparing, how to evaluate the annual report of that particular comparable company, whether all the factors remain the same or no, how to compute the profitability margin, what is the concept of arithmetic mean or the concept of arm's length range as per the income tax act, and how to undertake the accurate adjustment if there are any differences. So this is the overall economic analysis to understand how to do a comparability analysis. Like I mentioned, you already have a profitability of the Indian entity, which is your client. Now you want to compare with the profitability of another third party Indian players or third party global players in the similar kind of products or the industries. In order to extract those profitability of those companies, there are few licensed databases available in Indian context or global context. Like I mentioned, there are few Indian database, well-known database like Prowess or CapitaLine, which are kind of industry leaders and which provides information somewhere around 35,000 to 40,000 Indian companies, ranging from last 10 years profitability to shareholding structure to related party transaction information. Those kind of informations are provided by these Indian databases. Even the ACE database, AHTP database is quite well known in last 4 to 5 years. So with these three databases generally provides the information of Indian comparability or Indian companies who are registered with these databases. At the same time, there are few foreign databases are also available, wherein we can identify few complex transactions or few complex agreements. Like, to understand the royalty arrangement, there is a specific database of royalty state which gives information of royalty agreements on global level. What kind of similar royalty arrangements have been undertaken in the third party scenario at global level. Jurisdiction wise information is also provided, like only for US region or for Asia Pacific region, or for let's say GCC or MENA region or Africa region. Those kind of foreign databases gives information of the global jurisdictions. There is a separate database of loan connector which gives the information of the credit rating of the particular third party entities, what is the interest rate of the financial transaction in the third party scenario. So those kind of financial transactions between related party can be benchmarked using with the help of loan connector database. There is another database of TP Catalyst which provides the information of lots of global companies in the manufacturing or trading or service industries, jurisdiction wise industries, or analysis of the profitability. So those are the reputed Indian or global databases which can help you to extract a similar comparable in the similar industries in which Indian company is actually involved. After extracting, let's assume your client or Indian company is actually engaged in the software industries. After extracting a third party comparable players in the software industries, you can filter out those companies based on the quantitative features or qualitative features. The quantitative features may include availability of data, possibly that many of the companies are even though registered with the database, but possibly they don't have a latest data of last 2 to 3 years. In that case, those companies cannot be evaluated further. So those companies will not be accepted as a part of comparable list. Possibly the turnover filters or net worth filter. If let's say your client or A Limited Indian resident is having a turnover of let's say 5 crore, you cannot compare a company with 5 crore turnover with a company of let's say 5,000 crore like Infosys or TCS. At the same time, companies which is recently incorporated in last couple of years cannot be compared with the companies which are actually there in the market from last 20 to 25 years. Because of like the companies like Infosys or TCS, those are the industry leaders and enjoys a kind of quite premium brand or trademark in the industries that cannot be compared with a local software developer because of its because it has just incorporated, and the pricing may actually vary between those companies. The pricing policy may vary. Yeah. At the same time, the companies which are having a lots of or significant related party transactions of let's say more than 25% cannot be considered as a part of comparable companies because of its significant amount of related party transactions. So these are the quantitative filters which needs to be undertake or which needs to be analyzed in order to filter out the companies which have actually we have extracted from the global databases. After these quantitative filters, we can actually evaluate the comparable companies by way of qualitative analysis. For example, one company is actually engaged in a kind of similar industries or similar products or services, or no, which a company which is having extraordinary event in the current year cannot be compared or cannot be considered as a comparable company. For example, a company having a merger or demerger even current year, possibly the pricing policy or the profitability may significantly be different as against the pricing of a normal company. So those kind of qualitative analysis needs to be undertaken to understand whether a particular company is a comparable company to your client or no. This qualitative analysis may also differ industry to industry. There are few industry to industry comparability specific factors that needs to be kept in mind. For example, a shipping or logistics company, a company having a owner of ship or vessel cannot be compared with a NVOCC company, that is non-vessel owning company, because a ship owner or vessel owner company is actually employing a significant amount of capital employed as against NVOCC company which is actually not employing any of the significant capital. At the same time, software or IT company, software distributor cannot be compared with a software developer. or a manufacturer or trader of diamond or jewelry cannot be compared with the, like manufacturing of diamond or trader cannot be compared with a trader of diamond or jewelry because of these unique characteristics. At the same time, the business model may also play an important role. For example, the players like which are having a retail outlets like Tanishq. Tanishq has a retail outlets across India that cannot be compared with a player which does not have any retail outlets, like a local jewelry manufacturer or trader which is actually uh, selling the goods without retail outlet. Pricing may vary significantly because of retail outlet may require a kind of significant amount of advertisement or another marketing penetration strategy. As against that, a local player may not require those kind of contribution to that. So all those features which are industry specific needs to be kept in mind to understand one company can be compared with another company or no. These are important features which actually not only taxpayers evaluate, but over the years even tax authorities often evaluate by analyzing the financial statements or analyzing the actual business of that particular company. Just to understand what kind of factors we may evaluate from the financial statements of the comparable, there are many components of the annual report which gives the information of the business of a comparable company, which is auditor's report often actually provides the information of any qualitative opinion by an auditor. Often the management analysis or the director's report gives the information of the pricing policy adopted or the significant profit or the losses, the reason for that during the year, what are the segments of that particular entity, if the entity is actually having 2 or 3 segments, for example, software distribution, software development, ITES segment. So those kind of segment needs to be analyzed to understand which segment is relevant for the comparability purpose. So all those factors needs to be analyzed carefully while analyzing the financial statements or annual report of a comparability company. Especially the listed company actually provides a lots of information in the public domain itself, which is readily available in the public domain and which gives information of lots of significant factors which can be kept in mind to understand the comparability factors. Now, like I mentioned, if there are any differences, for example, the case of cell phones like Nokia and Apple cell phones, we know there are lots of differences. If we can undertake a reliable, accurate adjustments to eliminate those differences, we may try to eliminate the difference of Apple and Nokia cell phones also, possibly the difference of brand. If we can try to eliminate those difference of brand and the impact of that difference on the pricing, we may undertake those particular adjustments, and afterwards we can compare the pricing of Apple and Nokia cell phones after undertaking those adjustments. So the purpose of undertaking those adjustments is to compare 2 companies which are at par after undertaking those adjustments. These adjustments can be anything, can be a working capital adjustments, can be a forex adjustments, can be a depreciation adjustments, can be a custom duty adjustments. For example, a companies which actually imports a significant amount of goods from overseas is actually have to pay lots of 5 to 7% custom duty to that. So anyway, the pricing of that particular goods will actually be increased by that 5 to 7%, and thereby the profit will actually be reduced by that 5 to 7%. If we want to compare this particular company with a local player which does not have imported any of the goods from overseas entity and which has not actually paid any of the custom duty, we can do that by eliminating the custom duty component from the pricing from the A limited entity, and afterwards we can compare the pricing of A limited and the third party entity. So after eliminating the component of the custom duty, we can actually compare the prices of 2 entities. Similar to that, the forex adjustment, one entity has actually impacted because of the forex adjustment of 8 to 10% fluctuation during last couple of years. After removing the impact of forex component, we can compare the profitability of one entity with another entity. The working capital adjustments in the kind of COVID scenario, many of the companies are actually struggling with a lots of inventory or lots of receivable risk or lots of credit period risk. So if we can try to eliminate the difference of working capital on the profitability, we can compare 2 entities. So all those adjustments may be undertaken in a reliable manner in order to compare two entities. Just to be very sure, if we are undertaking these adjustments, we need to document this analysis appropriately in the documentation in order to justify at a later stage of time. It should not happen that if we are undertaking the adjustments, but we are not able to substantiate before the tax authorities. In that case, there is a risk that tax authorities may reject your documentation. So while there is a provision that we can actually undertake these adjustments, a cautious risk that needs to be kept in mind while undertaking this documentation. Let us concentrate on the compliance part of it, which is the accountant's report, more often known as form number 3CB. Like there is an income tax return that needs to be filed every year by the Indian companies. The Indian companies which are having an international transaction with its associated enterprise needs to annually file form number 3CB. Till last year, the deadline to file form number 3CB was 30th November. From financial year 1920 onwards, the deadline to file form number 3CB is October 2020. While there is no extension has been provided till now by CBDT, presently the deadline remains same as October 2020. And going forward, we need this deadline needs to be kept in mind. So along with the accountant's report, we need to also prepare documentation as mentioned in the previous slides, as per Rule 92D and read with Rule 10D. In the form number 3CB, even a single rupee of intercompany transaction needs to be reported. If you have actually purchased or sold transactions of even 1 rupee, which are overseas related party, that needs to be reported under accountant's report. The accountant's report are divided in the various clauses which provides the information of tangible property or intangible property, intra-group services, the financial transactions, domestic transfer pricing will come to that later, the business restructuring transactions, which are the related party with whom you have entered into transactions, what is the amount of transactions, what is the amount of arm's length price after undertaking comparability analysis, what is the method that you have actually selected, and this accountant's report needs to be certified by an independent chartered accountant. And this needs to be submitted, like I mentioned, before October 2020. So this is a compliance form which needs to be filed, and if you could not file, there is a penalty of INR 1 lakh rupees. So this is a typical TP audit process wherein the initial stage, like I mentioned, is to understand or evaluate which are the associated enterprises, what are the international transactions between two associated enterprises, what is the industry in which the client operates. Afterwards, the stage comes to understand or undertake the analysis of the functional analysis to understand what are the functions performed by two enterprises or what are the risks borne by associated enterprises. The later stage comes to undertake a comparability analysis to select a comparable from the licensed databases to select the most appropriate method to understand what is the profitability of the Indian company vis-a-vis the profitability of third-party entities. And afterwards, this stage comes to document all these analysis in a local TP documentation report and to disclose these particular facts in a form number 3CB as prescribed by the income tax authorities. So these are typical TP audit process that needs to be kept in mind. Just to give you a glance, what is the TP litigation mechanism in India right now? So the basic TP litigation mechanism is there is a transfer pricing. There is similar to income tax officers. There is a transfer pricing officers which are actually authorized to analyze the transactions between related parties. If there is an adjustment undertaken by the transfer pricing officers, the Indian taxpayers may approach DRP or CIT appeal. At the same time, higher authorities of ITAT or High Court or Supreme Courts are also available if there is any adjustments. These are the typical litigation mechanisms. At the same time, there is a specific safe harbor mechanism provided by income tax authorities, wherein safe harbor means there are particular category of transactions, let's say software development or ITS or intra-group loans or corporate guarantee, wherein income tax authorities have provided that if you are earning particular profitability percentage, in that case you can file a separate application in form number 3CEF in safe harbor, and thereby your case will not be scrutinized in detail. So for example, provision of software development services, department is saying that if the Indian company is earning a profitability of 17% or more, you can file a separate safe harbor application and your case will not be examined in detail at a later stage of time, because anyway you have earned a profitability of 17%, which is quite sufficient enough for a software development category. So these are kind of unique transactions for which safe harbor are actually provided. This is not only in India, but this is safe harbor mechanism is there in across jurisdiction worldwide level. Similar to that, advance pricing agreement, you must have heard the concept of advance pricing agreement, wherein the Indian taxpayer can actually enter into agreement with CBDT in advance in order to get a certainty of the pricing policy for the intragroup transactions, so that at a later stage of time there is no controversy or there is no detailed scrutiny for that. Lots of MNCs or lots of big or larger MNCs have actually gone for the gone ahead and filed the application for APA in order to get a certainty of the transactions. And once this agreement is entered between a taxpayer and CBDT, this agreement is valid for the 5 years. Once this agreement is entered, you just have to file an annual compliance report to provide information that your facts remain the same over the years and your case will not be examined in detail. So APA is basically agreement entered at the advanced stage for the future 5 years in order to get a certainty, and so that there will not be any litigation further at a later stage of time. So this is a kind of more or well-known concept which has been actually adopted by many of the Indian MNCs. So typical TP litigation life cycle is revolves around to maintain a TP documentation. Thereby you will file a form 3CB as per the prescribed deadline. If your case gets picked up for a scrutiny, there will be a detailed TP assessment will be undertaken by transfer pricing officers. If there is an adjustment undertaken by TP officers, you may approach DRP or CIT appeal. If there is no adjustment further, or if the DRP or CIT appeal accepts your case is completed. But if there is an adjustment, you can actually appeal to ITAT level. If ITAT accepts your case, or if ITAT deletes the adjustment, the case will get complete. But in case ITAT also upheld the adjustment made by transfer pricing officers, you can further appeal to High Court or Supreme Court and thereby go at a larger stage to get a clarity on the transfer pricing adjustment. So this is a typical TP life cycle that needs to undergo for adjustment. There is a transfer pricing penalty specifically provided under section 270 and 71 in income tax scenario, wherein for underreporting or misreporting of income, there is a significant amount of penalty of 50% or 200% of the tax evaded. You can understand that 200% of tax is a significant amount of penalty, and this is mainly applicable for the incomplete or inaccurate documentation. So you can understand the importance of proper TP documentation to that. If there is if you have not maintained the TP documentation, or if you have not reported a particular category of the transaction, there is a penalty of 2% of the transactions. This is also kind of significant amount of penalty. Assume a scenario that the transactions value between intercompany related party is, let's say, 10 crore rupees. So the 2% of the 10 crore would be somewhere around 20 lakh rupees. So this is a kind of significant amount of penalty. In case you fail to furnish a accountant's report, that is form number 3CB, there is a flat penalty of INR 1 lakh rupees. So the TP penalties are often significant as compared to a routine income tax penalties, and therefore we should try to comply with the TP regulations in India so that there is no such penalty exposure to the clients in future. I'll quickly glance through the recent introductions or amendments in the income transfer pricing regulations. One of the important amendment was in 2014, wherein the government has actually introduced the concept of range concept. Before 2014 scenario, we used to compare the profitability of Indian company with the arithmetic mean of profitability of third-party comparable companies. But afterwards, in tax authorities have actually introduced the concept of range, wherein if there is more 6 or more than 6 comparables, you have to actually compute the 35th or 65th percentile of that particular profitability of that range, and thereby you need to understand whether your client's profitability is within that range of 35th to 65th percentile or no. If the profitability of your client is not in within the 35th to 65th percentile, there might be chances of adjustment. In a worldwide scenario or global, other countries have mainly actually adopted an interquartile concept, wherein they have adopted a concept of 25th percentile to 75th percentile. Against that, Indian authorities have actually restricted the range to 35th to 65th percentile. So Indian authorities are kind of quite aggressive always, and thereby they have restricted this range. So this is a kind of unique amendment which has been introduced 4-5 years back. At the same time, authorities have mentioned that multiple year data of the comparable companies needs to be evaluated. That is, profitability of the Indian company for 2020, for example, needs to be compared with the profitability of the third party comparable. So third party comparables profitability of multiple year data, that is 3 years data, needs to be evaluated on an aggregate basis. So thereby we are actually removing the risk of significant deviation of one particular year. So this is also an interesting concept of multiple year data that needs to be kept in mind while undertaking comparability analysis. Specific domestic transactions. So earlier the TP provisions were introduced only for the overseas related party transactions, but in 2012, after the GlaxoSmithKline ruling, government has also made applicable the TP regulations to a local Indian transfer pricing domestic related party transactions. But after realizing that that there is a no tax evasion possible in certain category of transactions, again government has made amendment in 2017 to remove local domestic transfer pricing provisions for certain category of transactions. As on today, domestic transfer pricing provision is still applicable, but only few particular category of transactions wherein there is a tax holiday, benefit claimed by one particular entity, or beneficial rate of tax is applicable under section 115 BAB, which is introduced in last couple of years. So those kind of scenario, in only in that particular scenario, the domestic transfer pricing provision is applicable. Again, threshold for the domestic transfer pricing provisions is INR 20 crore rupees. So you can imagine that government has actually provided a leeway that transactions, local TP transactions having a less than quantum of less than 20 crores will not be get impacted and will not be required to comply with the local transfer pricing provision. So this is a kind of local TP documentation is also available, which needs to be kept in mind. The concept of thin capitalization is well known worldwide, which is a limitation of interest reduction. Just to give you a glance, wherein Indian company is paying interest to its overseas related party, how much amount of interest deduction can be claimed by the Indian entity has been prescribed by the Income Tax Act now. But this is applicable only in case there is an excess interest of more than INR 1 crore rupees. So this is interesting topic, which is also applicable in a case wherein Indian company is actually paying interest to its overseas entities. I'm not going in detail right now, but just to give you a glance that this is a kind of interesting topics which needs to be evaluated if there is any such intra-group transactions. The secondary adjustments, that is in case there is a primary adjustment by tax officers or by voluntary adjustment by the Indian taxpayer. In that case, the secondary adjustments requires that this excess money needs to be repatriated from overseas to India within a prescribed time. If we could not repatriate that excess money within a prescribed time, government will consider this as a deemed loan, and some interest needs to be paid on that particular excess money. Again, this is applicable only in case the primary adjustment is more than 1 crore and applicable only from the assessment year EY 17 or 18 onwards. So this is a kind of again interesting topic of secondary adjustment, and lots of controversies revolve around that topic, which needs to be kept in mind or to understand whether it is applicable to your particular fact pattern or no. To conclude like I mentioned, there are lots of complex issues in transfer pricing nowadays. Initially, traditionally, the TP adjustments revolved mainly around selection or the rejection of comparable companies, but tax authorities has also now evolved. The tax officers are also now educated, and most of the transfer pricing officers are kind of from IRS background. So you can understand they are smart enough to understand where is the actual economic analysis happening, or where is the actual profitability is shifted. So those kind of analysis of valuation analysis has been undertaken by the authorities. There is a lots of exchange of information between India and other developed countries. So there is often a risk of that multinational companies' data will be shared by one country to another. So these are the complex analysis topic which needs to be evaluated. At the same time, marketing intangible. If one company is actually uh, promoting the brand, let's say Microsoft India is promoting the brand of Microsoft group as a whole, the department requires Microsoft India to get compensated separately from Microsoft USA for the promotion of the brand. So this kind of marketing intangible requires a detailed analysis to understand if there is any transfer pricing implications or no. At the same time, lots of intra-group financing transactions are increasing nowadays, especially after COVID scenario. Indian companies are evaluating whether there can be a ECB, or there can be a masala bonds, or there can be any debenture or equity contributions from the overseas entities after Indian companies are struggling with the COVID scenario. So those intercompany financing transactions needs to be analyzed basis the credit rating or basis the profitability, uh, and what is the arm's length financing arrangement in that comparable scenario. So all those are intra-group services wherein the Indian company is actually receiving a benefit from after availing a intra-group services. This needs to be kept in mind. So these are a complex topic, and over the years, we will eventually experience in next 5 to 10 years that all these topics will come into mind or come into picture. Uh, so ultimately, these topics needs to be analyzed in detail to in order to avoid a risk of transfer pricing adjustments. And just to conclude, uh, like I mentioned earlier, first of all, we need to understand the applicability of transfer pricing, whether two enterprises are associated enterprise or no during the year, if there is any international transactions or no. We need to identify the gaps in the pricing policies, what are the actual present pricing policies, what can be the ideal pricing policies, if there is any intercompany transactions or no, what are the potential challenges to that. Uh, in order to implement a particular documentation, what are the uh, implementation analysis to that, if the actual conduct between the parties are actually documented between the contractual agreement or the intra-company transfer pricing documentation, those implementation needs to be done well in advance in order to avoid a future risk. And at the end, a timely compliance needs to be undertaken after disclosing a transaction in form number 3CB, or after disclosing a proper documentation in transfer pricing documentation report. So ultimately, to conclude, transfer pricing is all about uh, an interesting art wherein you have to document all the fact pattern. So the document is the ultimate conclusion of the transfer pricing analysis. So I would request everyone to understand the fact pattern of all the particular case and compare the fact pattern with the market scenario, and all the facts would be something different. It is not a particular science that it would go in a similar way. It is an art, so it will go or differ fact to fact. So the document is the ultimate conclusion for transfer pricing. So with this, I conclude my topic of basics of transfer pricing, and I hope that I could actually provide some insights and some background to all of you, which can actually help to many of you while undertaking a practical implementation of that in the compliance season. If there is any questions, or there is uh, anything that you want to clarify, you can ask right now, or maybe in future you can contact me on my email ID or contact number. Uh, I would be open to undertake few of the questions right now if there are any. I can see one of the questions that if the Form 3CB needs to be filed by all the related party entities, or there is a threshold. So like I mentioned, Form 3CB needs to be filed in all the cases, even wherein there is a single rupee of intercompany transactions between Indian company and the foreign overseas entity. So, and the compliance deadline for financial year 1920 is 31st October 2020. Right now, there is no extension given by the CBDT. The another question relates to what are the important documentation features that need to be kept in mind. Like I mentioned, you need to document the scenario, whether two companies are associated enterprise or no, whether there is an intercompany transactions during the current year or no, what are the comparability factors, how have you demonstrated that your comparability analysis is at arm's length price or no. So all that needs to be understand well in mind while documenting the transfer pricing documentation. Can you explain the secondary adjustment in little more? So to answer your question, Unnati, like I mentioned, secondary adjustment is only applicable wherein the primary adjustment is more than INR 1 crore, and it is applicable only for the adjustments from EY 17 or 18 onwards. So there is a controversy behind adopting secondary adjustments, and it's a detailed topic. Maybe you can contact me separately for that and try to explain that further in detail. The another question from Saurabh is, what if there is a transaction of related party in 1 year and in the same year there is a merger takes place? In that case, how the transfer pricing policy documentation will change from in this particular fact pattern? So to understand, Saurabh, there is a during the year related party has undertaken a transaction with its related party. So for that particular 6 months or 7 months before merger takes place, you need to provide or you need to comply with the compliance requirement of transfer pricing. And after merger, your transactions will be merged with the entity in which you are actually got merged. So all this fact pattern needs to be understand from that needs to be documented in the transfer pricing documentation. The another question is from the Ankit, that if does domestic transfer pricing applicable if the turnover exceeds 20 crore? So the threshold is not for the turnover. The threshold is for the intercompany transactions of INR 20 crore. And if the intercompany local transactions exceeds INR 20 crore, in that case, the domestic transfer pricing provisions will come into picture. The threshold does not relate to any turnover criteria. The another question is from the Rutuja. What was the reason for introducing a secondary adjustment? So interesting question, Rutuja. So in line with the global practices, wherein many of the companies are actually not repatriating money from outside India to India, and Indian companies actually, especially a loss-making company, is actually, in spite of transfer pricing adjustment, there is no actual tax payment by that Indian company because of the TP adjustments. In order to restrict that practices, the concept of secondary adjustment has been introduced in order to repatriate and access money from outside India to India, and otherwise that will be considered as a part of deemed loan, and some interest needs to be paid to that. I think we have done with the timing as well. I hope we can conclude the seminar right now, and if there is any particular questions, you may approach to me later. So I would request the Knowledge Garage, and I am very obliged to the Knowledge Garage who has actually given me a platform to speak on the interesting topic of transfer pricing. Thank you. With this, I conclude my presentation here.